Hey guys, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto had to breed to unlock his full power? And every Kunoichi volunteered. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Losing a bet to Willow, Xander was forced to dress up as a Jewish character for Halloween. She should have been more specific. Xander Harris stared down at his arm, his face slack with shock as he slowly reached out, tracing his fingers along his right, inner forearm. Touching the faded ink of a tattoo that had been aged more than 3 times his own lifespan. The cold, messy numbers that marked an occupant of Auschwitz-Birkenau. The numbers that marked a man who had been one of the Sonderkommando, forced to help dispose of the slaughtered bodies of his fellow inmates. Numbers so very much like the ones he'd seen once before, on the forearm of his best friend's grandfather. The look that had been on the man's face, the distant sadness, the numbed gaze. He hadn't recognized it as a boy, but now, as he looked into the mirror, he could see it there in his own eyes. The look of a man whose soul had died slightly because of the horrors he'd seen. As he closed his eyes, he could remember the choking, consuming smell, haunting him. The looks of horror and fear that sparked in the children, and the soulless resignation in the eyes of so many adults, flashed in front of his eyes. The feeling of his own body consuming itself in hunger, drained and near broken from one of the worst places humanity had created. He could feel the memories of hatred, fear, anger, pain, and such a myriad of emotions that he could never fully understand them. Mostly at himself, for escaping while others were left behind, to suffer even more. The fevered, soul-binding pledge he'd made to himself, not to let it ever happen again, not if he had the power to prevent it. A guilt and pain that shaped everything he would be for decades to come. Shaking his head softly, he could feel the memories of what happened next begin to form in his mind. Anya, the beautiful daughter, and the fire that had taken her life. Of the mob that had stopped him from saving her, and the first, explosive manifestation of what he was. Max Eisenhardt had died along with his daughter that day, when his wife had fled in terror at what he'd suddenly found himself capable of. Erich Lenscher had risen for a time, searching throughout Europe for his missing wife, desperate to find her. The same Eric that had met a man by the name of Charles, and engaged into a long philosophical debate. A debate each argued with a passion, not knowing the other was the same as they were. Then, that time had passed, and Eric faded, to give way to the name by which he would be known, and feared by the world over, Magneto. Xander shook his head, to escape the fog of memories as he felt the tears streaming down his cheeks. A part of him, his true memories flashed with a glimmer as he recalled the words he'd read being said by the X-Man Psylocke in the first issue of the second volume of the X-Men, the sheer force of the man. Not his physical strength, the strength of his mind, of his will. It almost threatened to overwhelm him as at the same time, he could feel it an odd comfort. Max Eisenhardt had become a force that shook the very world itself. Ripples of his actions affecting in so many ways, both good and ill, as he had struggled to walk the fine line between protecting his people, and becoming like the monsters he hated so. A difficult path he hadn't always been able to follow. And now, the memories of a man who'd lived a life so far beyond his own running through his mind. Xander Harris stared at the cheaply painted magenta and purple helmet he'd worn only hours early and wondered. If a man as strong as Magneto could fall prey to becoming the thing he feared the most, what did that say about an ordinary boy like he was? A sudden shot of anger raced through him, a burning, consuming then as he took the cardboard and tinfoil helmet, throwing it across the room with a silent scream as it struck a wall with a dull, near-silent thud, that fell, listlessly to the floor. How could he have done it? How could he have fallen so far? It ate at him, that gnawing realization that the man had betrayed himself and never saw it. Why? Turning his head, he rose up from his bed, and quietly made his way to an wrinkled cardboard box seated near his decrepit bookshelf. Stacks of comics lay within, years of collecting, savoring the stories with Jesse, the tales they told of heroes, their adversaries and the forces they faced. Almost savagely he would rip through the stacks, searching desperately until he found what was searching for. The Age of Apocalypse. Fingers dimly traced over the weathered cover as he shook his head, flipping through the pages as he fell quietly back down on his bed. A Magneto shaped by one last tragedy that had never happened in the main timeline. A Magneto who took up the dream of the friend that died in his arms at the hands of a time-traveling madman who had come to kill Magneto himself. A madman who was wiped from existence by killing his own father before he'd been born. On that day, Magneto had changed, taking up the banner of Charles Xavier's dream. And in that reality, he had, as Apocalypse had created concentration camps the likes of which staggered the one he'd endured in his youth. He'd risen up to become a hero, a beacon against the darkness of Apocalypse's madness. That potential was always there. There had been glimpses of it, seen in the past he remembered. Times where he stood against the dark, stood with the heroes as they had been known. But too often, that glowing spark of hope had been crushed by the fear and stupidity of people who had more power than they should have. Across the room, he could see a shining gleam of the busted padlock he'd picked up from where a vampire had ripped it from a door. Temptation lifted through him, as memories of a gesture, a pull, of tapping into a power that was more powerful than most ever realized. A temptation that he fought down with a rising swell of fear. What if he couldn't do it? Or, more frightening to him, what if he could? What if, along with the memories, along with the tattoo, he'd been touched so deeply by the man, that he left everything behind? Shaking his head, he tossed the comic in his hands aside, and closed his eyes. For a brief moment, he entered into a blissful nothingness. Then, the dreams began. Next morning, Xander groaned softly as he looked blearily up at the light streaming through the library windows. Remind me again why I had to be here so damned early. Because of last night maybe? Buffy Summers suggested, a blonde brow arching up as she shrugged just a bit, fighting back a yawn. You know, when you went all big baddie and tore apart the warehouse district? That wasn't me, he protested, hands held up. That was Magneto. He paused a moment, before suddenly grinning back at Buffy. Or, are you saying that it was you that was running around, calling cars demons and being about as useful as a sack of potatoes? I'm gonna go with the hay. The Slayer glared back at her friend, sticking out her tongue playfully. As much as I'm sure this is quite the fascinating discussion, Rupert Giles spoke up as he walked up to the pair. Buffy has already told me that her occupation has had lingering effects on her. French test is in the bag, the girl nodded happily. Yes, well, that's well and good, but, Giles coughed softly before he turned his attention towards Xander. I was curious to know if you two had noticed any lingering after effects? Considering what I've been told about the man who possessed you. While Giles left the words hanging, Xander took a slow, long moment to swallow, a chill running down his spine as he wordlessly pulled down the sleeve of his shirt, to reveal the faded tattoo. Just a few. Giles. What is? Good Lord. The British librarian paled slightly as he stared down at the faded numbers on the boy's arm. Is that? That's Magneto's Auschwitz tattoo, isn't it? Willow Rosenberg squeaked quietly as she stared at her friend's arm. I mean, it's just like my grandfather's. All faded and, oh my god, Auschwitz? Buffy spoke up, the confusion written on her face as she stared at the extreme reactions of the others present. The concentration camp Buff, Xander answered her, his voice struggling to remain nonchalant. During World War II, where, when Magneto was younger than us, was forced to be one of the Sonderkommando. Good Lord. Giles slumped down in his chair, staring at the haunted look in the young man's eyes. And you remember it? All of it, Xander spoke so softly, the smell most of all. Oh Xander? Willow leapt up, quickly wrapping her friend in a tight hug. Could someone make with the explanations for Slay Girl here? Kinda clueless? Buffy spoke up, her hand raising with her words, before visibly flinching back at the suddenly outraged glare Willow shot at her. Wow, easy there Wills. Xander reached up, putting his hand on her shoulder. Not everyone has had a grandfather that survived, or is a historian-type person like you and Giles. But, there was anger there in those eyes, as she looked back at Xander. Seriously, she doesn't know, he reassured her gently. I'm gonna guess it's of the bad then? Buffy offered, a slight hesitance in her words. Right then, Giles spoke up, his face drawn and pale, as he shakily put his hand on the back of a chair. The Sonderkommando were Auschwitz prisoners that were forced to dispose of the bodies of their fellow prisoners who had died or been executed. The estimates by some reports put the death toll for Auschwitz alone at over 1 million. Paling herself now, Buffy turned her hazel eyes back to Xander. And, you remember it? All of it. Xander's voice came out in a half-chuckled rasp. I remember Auschwitz. I remember how he married and tried to put it behind him. I remember the joy he felt when he became a father for the first time. I remember the fear, the pain, The rage that led to him first manifesting his powers as he was forced to watch as building his infant daughter was burned to the ground by a mob that forced him to watch. I remember the look of fear and horror on his wife's face when she realized what he'd done, he continued, his voice soft, subdued. I remember how that look stabbed to the heart of him, ate at him, how she forsook him because he was different. I remember the years he spent wandering Europe, hoping, desperately to find her. I remember the friendship he formed with Charles Xavier, and how badly it hurt him to face off against his closest friend time and time again. Good Lord. Good Lord. Giles slumped into the chair, staring at the boy sitting before him, that remembered a life not his own. A life of pain and misery like nothing he could find himself imagining. Xander. Everything he did because he wanted to protect his people. The boy spoke softly as he looked into each of his friends' eyes, one by one. He did everything in his power to try and prevent them from learning the pain he'd learned. You have no idea the sheer strength he had. Not his powers, not his physical strength. But his will, who he was, It's frightening. Xander, I know it can be difficult to come to terms with what you've been through. Giles watched as Buffy had moved next to the boy, hugging him along with Willow, and I know having the memories of such a dangerous, powerful man can be traumatic. You don't understand, Giles, he spoke up, his eyes shining with unshed tears as he met the Watcher's gaze. He was so strong, stronger than any of us. Who he was, and he was determined to protect them all. All that strength, all those intentions, and he still came so close to becoming what he hated, what had hurt him so badly. That's what scares me. The boy took a deep, shuddering breath before he looked across the table at the man. If someone that strong fell to the dark side, what chance does a weak, ordinary kid like me have? Well, if it isn't the Hidden Mist's missing Nin Momochi Zabuza. A pair of blue eyes blinked for a moment, before a blonde head canted lightly to the side as it looked up at a figure standing on the hilt of the massive sword embedded in the trunk of the tree. Meh, Kisami's cooler. There was a pause in the air, as 5 sets of eyes turned pointedly towards the blonde, the boy looking back at them with a shrug and a yawn. What? Just stating a fact. Kisami's just a cooler missing mist Nin than Momo here. He jerked his thumb and said, lightly twitching Nin's direction before yawning again. Just like Itachi's a cooler Uchiha than our bastard Sasuke. Kakashi almost fell over in shock at the bored words leaving the boy's mouth, as he idly wondered if the boy was trying to get himself killed. Naruto. Wha? You know I'm right. The Junin twitched lightly at the casual response. Even he kept his eye trained on Zabuza, though, keeping a careful eye on the rapidly twitching Sasuke. I mean, seriously. He's called Little Zabuza for a reason. The missing Nin in question almost fell off his sword at that last comment as he struggled to turn around, staring down at the boy with wide, incredulous eyes. How the hell? Who the fuck are you? Everyone's stares were locked on the bored-looking boy as he lightly dug his pinky into his ear. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and don't forget it. Naruto. There was a sigh as Kakashi finally looked down at the boy. This isn't an opponent you can beat, and it's really not a good idea to keep antagonizing him. Meh, Naruto casually shrugged in response as he would idly wrap his fingers behind his neck, leaning back. Nah, you want scary? You should see a PM sing Itachi. There was more than a pause in the air then as both Kakashi and Zabuza finally fell to the ground simultaneously in shock. Just before a monotone voice echoed through the air, I heard that brat. Instantly a pair of black eyes widened in recognition, before anger boiled through them as Sasuke Uchiha began to stare wildly around the woods, searching for its source as a harsh, angry whisper erupted past his lips. Itachi. Hey Itachi-chan. The blonde boy grinned widely, as he seemed to wave in a random direction in the woods. I know you did. Why do you think I said it? Everyone's eyes followed the direction of the wave in disbelief, before a sudden flock of ravens erupted from the trees, then converged into a single, black-cloaked figure, staring back at them. A black-cloaked figure, with a pair of cold, red eyes Sharingan eyes before the cold monotone continued. I would prefer. You stopped calling me that, Naruto. Immediately a look of deep thought crossed the blonde boy's face as he caught his chin between thumb and fingers and seemed to consider the idea for a long moment before looking back with a fox-like grin. Nope, sorry, definitely Itachi-chan. A sigh of resignation passed the young man's lips as he would half glare back at the boy. Very well, you bring this on yourself. Itachi stiffened slightly before looking directly into the boy's eyes. Naruto-sama. Ah, damn it. I told you not to call me that. A visible pout crossed the blonde boy's face as he crossed his arms about his chest. I'm not the old man, damn it. Are you as lost as I am? Kakashi turned slightly, his eye meeting the confused look of Zabuza as the missing nin was staring in shock at the genin brat addressing a mass murderer, known as one of the most dangerous men alive. A prodigy who had apparently snapped and slaughtered almost his entire family, like he was an old friend or brother. More so, I think, the silver-haired Junin responded as he twitched lightly. This is most unexpected. Truce until we figure out what the hell's going on. The missing nin offered. I think it might be best. The leaf nin agreed with a slight nod of his head. That's gonna be a long truce then, little Zabuza. A third voice offered up with a chuckle. I've been in the middle of it and I still don't know half of what's going on. Both men's eyes widened as they twitched lightly, then looked behind them. Wha? You thought the brat was just blowin' smoke outta his ass? Both sets of eyes wandered up, to see the sharp, pointed grin of a towering figure standing over them, his face shark-like in appearance as he easily held a wrapped, massive blade over his shoulder, and Zabuza's own cleaver casually in his hand. Before either figure could respond, Naruto casually gave a half-wave towards the figure. Hey Kisa-chan. You should know by now they never believe me. The man only grinned wider in response and chuckled as he casually shoved his fellow missing nin's blade down into the ground before he walked past the stunned group, petting Zabuza lightly on the head as he went. Yeah, hey a little Zabuza. Y'all always end up in the most interesting of situations, Naruto-kun. Hey, it's a gift. The blue-eyed boy happily grinned in response as he leaned backwards, his arms held above his head. Right, Itachi-chan? Indeed, Naruto-sama, the slender man responded, his face carefully schooled to neutrality, despite the slight mocking tone to his words. Itachi. The almost jovial mood was interrupted, as Sasuke finally seemed to break free from the shock of seeing his brother again, his voice screaming raw as he pulled out a kunai and started to race towards the figure. At least, until he ran by Naruto and managed to trip over a suddenly extended foot and was sent sprawling face first into the ground, and like I said, Itachi-chan's much cooler than the bastard here. In spite of everything, Sasuke-kun. Sakura immediately rushed over to the dark-haired boy, before glaring silently up at Naruto as she kneeled over her teammate as he pushed himself up to his feet. Wha? You'd rather I let him run head first at an S-class missing nin he has no hope of even coming close to defeating? The blonde responded to her accusing glare, before looking over towards the trembling Tazuna. Hey, old man, how much of that sake you got? I think I'm gonna need a drink in a sec. Only to immediately be smacked upside the head by Kisame as the still stunned Tazuna only stared back at him. You're too young for sake, brat. But Kisa-chan. The boy half-whined as he pouted once more. Old enough to kill, old enough to drink. Hey, you wanna end up like those two? Kisame jerked his thumb in the direction of the still wide-eyed Kakashi and Zabuza. Haku. Get your girly ass out here. I know little Zabuza has ya hiding out here somewhere. There was a pause before a kimono-clad masked figure carefully stepped out from behind the tree, bowing its head reluctantly towards Kisame. Kisame-sama. Naruto blinked a moment, looking incredulously from the new figure and Kisame before suddenly beginning to laugh loudly as he pointed a finger at the shark-like man, and wordlessly continued to laugh. Grumbling softly, the blue-skinned man merely smacked the boy lightly behind his head once more before muttering, "Hush, Naruto-kun." Hee. Kisame-sama. The boy merely chuckled as he accidentally found his foot landing on the back of the slowly rising Sasuke's head, shoving it back into the dirt. Oops, sorry bastard, forgot you were there. Naruto. Oh. Instantly the pink-haired girl stood up, clenching her fist as she glared at the boy. Instantly the boy narrowed his eyes as he studied the girl, catching his chin in another thinking pose before looking towards Itachi. Nah. Itachi-chan PM Sing is still scarier. Kisame copied Naruto's gesture, looking between the stoic man and the pink-haired girl. Gotta go with the brat on this one. Pinky here doesn't have a candle compared to a PM Sing Itachi. At least I don't go on a sake and ice cream binge, Kisa-chan, the flat voice of Itachi countered, blubbering like a lovesick schoolgirl. Hey, leave the rocky road out of this. The towering man almost whined as he glared back at Itachi. It didn't do anything to you. Okay, that's it. Finally, Kakashi couldn't take it anymore, his eyes narrowing as he would look at the arguing group. What the hell is going on? We're just here to keep Naruto-kun from causing too much trouble. The form of Kisame shrugged slightly before lightly ruffing the blonde's hair. Otherwise, well. The man shrugged helplessly. It's not a good idea to let him get bored. Really not a good idea. What's so bad about the dead last? Sasuke's voice coughed up, as he glared up at Kisame. He's an idiot. Kisame looked for a moment towards the downed Uchiha before carefully beginning to inch away from the boy. Ya know. Most people would take two of the most dangerous missing nin in the bingo book showing up to keep a brat out of trouble as a sign. There's something to worry about. Kisa-chan. The words were soft as the blonde boy gave the shark-faced man a pointed look and a shake of his head. All right. There was a nervous chuckle escaping the swordman's lips as he scratched the back of his head before looking towards the masked nin. So Haku. Why you two going after this old drunk? Zabuza-sama has agreed to assassinate Tazuna-san for Gato-san. There was a chilly calm to the voice as the figure lightly canted its head to the side, though Hikate-san seems to be opposed to the idea. Well, he was probably hired to protect the old fart. Kisame nodded before he pulled out a gourd and took a drink. This is gonna be interesting. So, old fart, you hired Naruto-kun's team? Yeah, though, didn't expect to get stuck with a bunch of loudmouth brats. The man nodded numbly as he shakily brought out another sake bottle and began to take a drink. Kisame immediately struck a thinking once more identical to the one Naruto had used earlier. Help Naruto-kun or little Zabuza and Haku. Again, what the hell is going on here? Kakashi spoke up once more, his eye twitching as his earlier question had apparently been ignored. Seems Kisame and the Uchiha have some kinda relationship to your student. Zabuza offered helpfully. Kisame letting anyone call him Kisa-chan and live is downright scary. Naruto, explain to me what's going on. The silver-haired Junin glared down at the blonde, arms crossed pointedly. Now. Hehe. The boy nervously scratched the back of his head. Well, ya see, it's kinda sorta complicated. Under fucking statement of the year, came the deadpan voice of Itachi as he walked over to stand next to the blonde. Get up already, Sasuke, and behave. You can try and kill me later when you're stronger. Oh, you're the person he wants to kill? The blonde spoke up blandly. Sorry Sasuke, can't let ya do that. You what? The black-eyed boy glared towards Naruto as he slowly pushed himself up to his feet, glaring between the young man and the boy. Can't let ya kill any of my precious people. The boy responded with a sage nod as he crossed his arms about his chest in finality. Your precious people? There was a distinct sound of disbelief in Sasuke's voice as he just stared at his teammate. Oh yes, Sasuke-kun, Itachi responded, his voice, suddenly coming to life. A glint was seen in his eyes. I belong to Naruto-sama, mind, body, heart and soul. He leaned in, whispering down into Sasuke's ear. Loud enough for both the boy's teammates to hear. I'm utterly and completely devoted to his happiness and satisfaction. Sakura's eyes widened as the mental image came unbidden into her mind, leaving a slow trail of drool to form against the corner of her mouth as a slight trickle of blood began to form beneath her nose. Her inner voice practically drooled all over herself as immediately, various images of the three males in front of her, in a variety of different stages of undress. As her face flushed crimson, her mind finally couldn't take anymore before she promptly fainted backwards in a boneless heap. That was mean, Itachi-chan. Naruto glared towards the dark-haired young man, before he couldn't keep his grin down, but really funny. Though, I think you traumatized the bastard again. Itachi canted his head towards Naruto, before looking back down at where Sasuke stood, shocked still, staring forward into nothing. Oops. Naruto almost giggled as the fake look of apology on Itachi's face before he walked over, and simply stuck a stick of Pocky into the taller Uchiha's mouth. Right. Behave yourself, Itachi-chan. The boy said as he stood on his tiptoes and petted the young man atop his head before looking at him sternly, or I'll put you on a no-Pocky diet. A whimper escaped the missing nin's lips before he stared at the boy with wide eyes. No, not that, please. Light slowly returned to Sasuke's eyes as he looked to see his brother, his cold monster of a brother, whimpering like a frightened puppy in front of his dead last teammate, who was in turn petting the bane of his existence like a favorite pet. What the hell is going on? Well, you see. Naruto scratched the back of his head again before looking at Kisame, then Itachi. Kisa-chan, Itachi-chan, you better explain it, I don't think they'll believe me. As attention began to focus on the pair mentioned, Naruto was quietly sneaking his way over towards the stationary masked ninja, until he brought himself right up to the figure and grinned a happy grin at it. So, Haku, right? Well, explain already. Sasuke glared, helpless frustration in his eyes as he stared at his parents' murderer, just a few feet away, and yet, so far beyond reach. Not that you'll likely tell us the truth. Let's see. Kisame again adopted the thinking pose as it were, before giving off a simple, savage grin at the rest of the group. Just so you know, what we're about to tell you is considered an sulfur monosulfide class secret in Leaf. He trailed off a bit, making a shooing motion at Tazuna. So, no civvies. And telling anyone without Naruto-kun's or the Hokage's permission. Wouldn't be pleasant. What, you expect us to believe a couple of missing nins, including one from Kiri, are working for the Hokage? There was a scoff from Sasuke as the dark-haired boy glared back at the shark man, even as the bridge builder nervously made his way towards the path ahead of them, out of earshot. Nope, we don't. He paused a moment before glancing at Itachi. Well, I can't speak for Sunshine over there. Sorry, SS class secret, you understand. The man shrugged helplessly as he would idly pull out a box of Pocky from his cloak, sticking a second stick in his mouth to go with the first before he offered the box to his brother without even looking. Right, Kakashi responded flatly. Even Sasuke unconsciously took one of the sticks of Pocky and stuck it into his mouth, before the box shifted and was offered around. So, why aren't you shooing Zabuza off then? Easy. Kisame took one of the sticks of Pocky, popping it into his mouth as he responded, I know he's smart enough to realize just what'll happen to him if he starts to blab. The two masked men couldn't help but twitch, nervously as they looked at one another, then down at the box of Pocky offered to them before their eyes went questioningly towards Itachi. Itachi-chan's being nice, Kisame explained, as his own Pocky stick shifted against his lips. Trust me. You want to take the Pocky? He gave them a meaningful look. Trust me. Zabuza quickly grabbed a stick at Kisame's insistence before pulling down his mask to lightly pop it into his mouth with a grateful nod. One thing he'd learned over the years was when someone you knew could kill you in a heartbeat was putting that particular kind of emphasis on being polite. You did it. Especially when it was Kisame telling him to play nice with another S-ranked missing nin. Kakashi, however, was looking at the box with a single, skeptical eye before looking back towards Itachi's eyes. Itachi's rapidly narrowing full Sharingan eyes, that seemed to almost glow. Quickly settling on a course of action, his fingers almost flew through the air, snagging a stick of the sweet treat before nodding gratefully. When Itachi's eyes only narrowed further, Kakashi was put in a predicament. He was reasonably sure that the reason for that particular glare came from the fact that he hadn't stuck it in his mouth like everyone else. Which in turn put him into a further spot. Not even the threat of death or a night with Enko Mitarashi brought about the removal of his mask. So, he did the only thing he could, shoving the coated biscuit stick directly through his mask and into his mouth as he gave Itachi as best of a smile as he could. Apparently satisfied, Itachi nodded before putting the box back into his cloak. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, fallen heavy on the air as the man munched happily away at his Pocky, before he noticed the looks in his direction. What? So, secret, what's going on? S-class secrets and whatnot. Zabuza offered lightly as his Pocky stick twitched in his mouth. Ring a bell? Oh, I thought you were going to tell them? Itachi arched a brow towards Kisame as Sasuke twitched next to him. Hey, it's Leaf secret, I was missed. Remember? The swordsman responded defensively. That means it's your secret to blab. Fine, Itachi sighed softly before he shifted a bit, before he adopted Naruto's thinking pose, causing both Kakashi and Sasuke to twitch lightly before he continued. Well, to start off with, I had a really shitty father. Kakashi and Zabuza both could feel a trickle of sweat crawl down the sides of the heads as they both stared at Itachi as he continued, ignoring the intensifying glare that grew on Sasuke's face as he chomped away at the Pocky stick. He treated me like a weapon, treated Sasuke here like a worthless piece of trash because he wasn't a perfect little tool for him to use as he saw fit. And, of course there was that whole treason to take over Leaf Village in a particularly bloody manner. What? Sasuke's eyes widened in shock as he stared at his brother, an image flashing in his eyes, the various little hidden meetings his father held at their house, some of the veiled words and looks his father shared with his brother, and the look of fear in his mother's eyes. I've seen war. I got through the academy at the age I did because of war. Otherwise I would have just far closer to a regular ninja kid than I was. Itachi shrugged lightly, but, dear father figured I was the perfect tool. Anbu captain and whatnot. He paused a moment at that, before canting his head curiously towards Kakashi. Did you ever get your record back by the way? Kakashi blinked a moment, before merely smiling back towards Itachi with his eye closed in answer. Good, I'll have to see about breaking it again, for old time's sake. The young man paused a moment, pulling out another Pocky stick apparently out of nowhere and munching on it as a look of concentration passed his eyes. Now where was I? Perfect tool, Anbu captain, treason, other bad things? Kisame offered blandly. Ah, right, thanks Kisa-chan. The man responded with an almost frightening cheerfulness in his formerly monotone voice as he continued the morbid subject. Well, as it happened, I got the lovely position of being a double agent. I fed information about the planned treason back to the Hokage, his advisors and a certain ex-shinobi named Danzo. Of whom, everyone but the Hokage wanted to just go ahead and start killing off the entire clan. Hokage-sama tried to reason with the clan, tried to find a way for everyone to get along. There was a pause before the man blandly continued, he failed. And you killed your clan, Zabuza concluded with a shrug, happens. Sasuke looked incredulously at the missing nin's nonchalant response, it happens? Look kid, in Mist, the way our academy used to work, was you were partnered up with another kid, spent all your time together, training, living, sharing the good times and the bad. Kisame responded with a half yawn, practically family. He smirked then before locking his eyes with the younger Uchiha as he continued. Then came graduation day. You either killed your partner, or they killed you. At least, until that brat's class. The dark-haired boy arched a brow as he followed Kisame's thumb to Zabuza. So? I killed them. The man shrugged a bit before he grinned around the remainder of the Pocky stick. Class of 100. And I killed every single other person in it. After me, they decided it might be a better idea to change things. Hey. Sasuke couldn't help but pale as he stared at the man talking about the massacre of a group of children, as a child, with an almost fondness. You just killed them. All of them? He looked then, to his teacher, looking wide-eyed, hoping that he'd tell him that the man was lying. Kakashi only winced slightly and nodded as Kisame spoke up. Yup, he did. Definitely changed things up in Mist, and what got him first noticed by the swordsman. But, anyway, we're getting off point, Itachi? The man in question looked up from where he'd been popping another stick of Pocky into his mouth. Did you say something, Kisa-chan? Feeling a sense of familiar déjà vu, Kakashi eyed the twitching Kisame lightly. You're not going to start going on about eternal rivals and the flames of youth, are you? Kisame's twitching only increased as he shifted his eyes towards Kakashi. If you start comparing me to him, I will hurt you. I still owe that bastard for the kick he gave me. Just checking, Kakashi responded with relieved cheer as he finally pulled out his book and started reading. Whenever you're ready to continue, Itachi-san. Let's see. I was given the order to slaughter them all. Went and recruited Madara to help me. Killed everyone but Sasuke here. Made a deal with the Hokage to spare him in return for losing my status in Konoha. The elder Uchiha paused a moment, considering with a finger tapping on his chin. And I made Sasuke hate me so he'd come and kill me eventually and be strong enough to restore the honor of the Uchiha clan. Rebuilding them as the protectors of the leaf instead of the arrogant self-centered pieces of shit we became. Sasuke merely stared at his older brother in response. What? The older Uchiha responded, raising an eyebrow down at his brother. Didn't you find it the least bit odd that I said you weren't worth the trouble to kill because you were too weak, when all the other children were killed? Alright, so we'll just leave it as we believe you for now until we can talk to the Hokage. Kakashi quickly spoke up, raising his hands carefully. That still doesn't explain how you know Naruto. Oh that? Itachi shrugged a bit and munched on his Pocky happily. He turned us into his pets. The resulting crash of bodies falling to the ground sent a small cloud of dust rising into the damp air. Three sets of eyes stared in disbelief at the missing nin munching so happily away at the Pocky, while the swordsman chuckled again. Perhaps, it would be best if you dropped the genjutsu, Itachi-chan? Fine, fine. He munched on another of the sticks of Pocky before looking at the wide-eyed nins on the ground around them. Remember, S-class secret. Get handed over to Ibiki and Anko, etc., etc., etc. With that, the man raised his fingers up and gave a simple, soft syllable, Kai. Sasuke and Zabuza both simply stared at the pair, unable to comprehend what was going on, as Kakashi spoke up carefully. Well, that's interesting. So, Haku, right? Yes, the figure nodded with a bow as it stood impassively in front of the boy in its kimono. You mind taking off your mask? Naruto blinked a moment as he canted his head to the side. I'm sure it's cool and whatnot for battle and all, but it's kind of freaky to have a conversation with, ya know. I'm not sure that would be appropriate. Naruto-san, was it? The figure responded easily enough. You're not gonna end up killing the old drunk, so might as well. The boy shrugged slightly. You think Zabuza's dumb enough to go up against Kisame, with or without Itachi? Slowly the figure shook its head but still made no move to remove its mask, staying silent as it merely looked back at the boy. Gonna play it that way, huh? The boy grinned back at the figure before threading his fingers together and stretching his arms out, popping his knuckles in the process. Take this. And with that, suddenly 5 shadow clones appeared, grabbing hold of the masked ninja before it could get away. As a moment of panic settled into Haku's chest, the next wave of the assault began, as the shadow clones began their attack. Tickling the figure all over. Haha, the dreaded Uzumaki tickle attack. The boy stood triumphantly over the figure. Ready to take your mask off yet? The figure shook its head, struggling against the laughter trying to burst past its lips as the fingers worked against the silk over its body, before finally, a giggling laugh erupted out of its mouth as it convulsed with laughter, quietly begging, stop. Place please. Ready to take off your mask? The boy grinned back as he watched the tickling. Yes. The figure stuttered, laughing even harder as the clones kept up their relentless assault. Okay, but you better keep up your side of the deal. And with that the 2 clones holding onto Haku's arms vanished into smoke. Fine, Naruto-san. The ninja responded with a heavy breath before reaching up, pulling the mask from its face to reveal a pale, tear-streaked face with delicate, feminine feature, and a definite pout to its lips. Happy? Yup. The boy grinned back. No fun to talk to a mask like that. Haku sighed softly, but continued to pout back at Naruto. So, how do you know Kisame-sama? Kisa-chan? The boy shrugged slightly before grinning. Long story. How do you get away with calling Kisame-sama that? Haku asked, clearly perplexed as those dark eyes blinked at the boy. It just doesn't seem like something he'd allow. The boy grinned a bit sheepishly, part of that long story. Let's just say, Itachi-chan took me out of the village for a while once, and we ended up meeting Kisa-chan. You're an odd boy, you know that? Yeah, but I protect my precious people. The boy grinned back. Nobody's gonna hurt my Kisa-chan, or my Itachi-chan, or any others I care about. Haku smiled softly at that. They mean a lot to you, don't they? Yup. The boy paused a moment, before squinting at Haku. So, you a boy or a girl? The figure blushed softly, pouting in the process. I'm a boy. Really? Naruto shrugged slightly before patting the dark-haired boy atop his head. Well, you're a pretty boy at least. I know a lot of girls like that. Thank you. I think. The boy giggled a bit as he would look back at Naruto. Do you know what they're talking about over there? Probably Itachi and me. The boy shrugged slightly. I wonder how many times they'll make Kakashi-sensei and Zabuza fall over. Zabuza-sama does not just fall over. Haku responded with a pout. He did earlier. He must have slipped. The words rumbled softly through the air, hissing with an angry menace from the cold depths of shadow that bled out from behind cold steel bars. There was a shift with them, a form, vaguely seen in the darkness, moving ever so slightly and indistinct before fading again. But before those shadows, blue eyes looked on, unflinching as wild spikes of sunny blonde hair stood out against the muted grays of the prison around him. You're the Kyuubi, aren't you? The words were hesitant at first, a tinge of fear hinting at a depth of conflicting emotions that seemed through every part of his body. Go. Away, the words were thick, cold and apathetic as they echoed through the air, pulsing against the cold, uncaring stone that represented the prison. I come all this way, and that's all you have to say? There was a tick of irritation pulsing through the boy's eyes as his eye twitched slightly. Not gonna try and kill me? Not gonna even threaten me? A heavy silence was his only response, the mass of shadows shifting softly, in response, but nothing more. I'm talking to you, stupid fox. The irritation was blossoming into anger, pouring through his lips as he growled out a response. I've put up with the shit that comes with keeping you around long enough. It's time you start paying some rent for it. No, the word was simple and soft, laced with a cold apathy as the body just continued to softly shift, breathing slowly, softly in and out in the only sign of life. No, we're falling down a ravine, to our deaths unless you give me some of your stupid red chakra, and you say no. The boy growled, his eyes flashing as he grabbed hold of the bars and gripped tight, almost pushing his face into the cell as he yelled at the figure, "Do you want to die?" Again, there was nothing but silence in response, the massive figure just continuing to breathe in and out in that slow, steady manner. His eye twitching again, the boy growled as he began to bang loudly against the bars. Voice exploding past his lips, he glared at the form. Hey. It's bad enough I gotta put up with this shit from the village. I didn't ask that bastard Hokage to trap you in here with me. But right now I need some of that damned red chakra of yours. So hand some over or I'm gonna come in there and drag it out of you. There was flinch, visibly quivering through the firm in the middle of the boy's rant, before finally a single crimson eye could be seen narrowly opening. Shining dully in the shadows, a growl began to slowly echo off the walls, surrounding the boy as he could feel a wave of anger pulsing through the air. It pressed against him, a heavy weight of fear, digging icy grips into his chest, threatening to force him back, away into his knees as the voice spoke, "Shut up and let me die in peace." "Oh hell no," the boy shouted back, fighting off that wave that threatened to paralyze him, to drive him to his knees. "Not gonna happen. Either give me some of that red stuff, or I'm gonna stay with you for eternity. If we die like this, I'm gonna drag you down to hell with me and never let you get a moment's peace." Brat, the word was spat as if the vilest insult it could muster, a cold acidic word that ate at him as that sliver of shadowed crimson somehow narrowed even further. "Fine, get out of here and leave me in peace." "So, this is where you came to hide." The voice was a silken purr as the shadows around the room darkened and pooled into a feminine silhouette. "My. Quite the step down from back home, isn't it?" Xander Harris groaned softly as he pinched the bridge of his nose. Before he spoke, "What do you want, Morrigan?" "What? I can't visit my little brother, who everyone thought was dead, but has been actually hiding out, pretending to be immortal on the helmet." The shape responded, until the shadows bleed away, revealing the curvaceous form of a woman, dressed in clinging purple pants and half-buttoned white blouse. Xander studied the emerald-eyed and emerald-haired woman in front of him for a moment before grunting just a bit. "Preferably?" "No. Really, Alexander, I'm hurt." The woman pouted as she casually slipped over and flopped down onto the shoddy excuse for a mattress he called a bed, making a face at him as she shifted uncomfortably. "And, how can you possibly live like this? Shouldn't you be running around Makai?" The boy countered with a glare. "Or, ya no, running Makai." "Meh," the woman responded with a dismissive wave of her wrist. "Too boring. I mean, it's so much more fun to find a good fight. Though, since you left, that have been so disappointingly few." "So glad to know I was missed," he countered sarcastically. "So, again, what the hell do you want, Morrigan?" "I was curious," the woman casually purred, her body stretching out in a graceful, sensual manner, "what the big bad helmet opening up, and then, I suddenly sense a flare of an oh-so-familiar energy and it goes shut. I come out here to investigate, and I find such an interesting situation." She paused a moment, her eyes fluttering open before she affixed Xander with a feline smirk. "Does she know what you did to her?" "Does who know what?" Xander responded, his face blank as he stared down at the woman. "The former slayer, of course." Morrigan laughed a low, throaty thing. "Does what you did to her? Does she know she's even less human than she was? Does she know she's not even a slayer anymore?" "I don't know what you're talking about," he snapped back. "We have the one and only slayer here." He paused a moment before shrugging slightly. "Well, we did until she went to visit her father in LA. "Oh, please." The woman laughed softly before fixing him with a look. "You know as well as I do, that when a slayer dies, they don't come back. That nasty little parasite rips their souls right out of their bodies when it leaves. I was asleep, Morrigan. The boy immediately shook his head. I only gave her CPR, then the opening of the helmet woke me up. Oh, foolish, foolish little brother, is that what you think? Morrigan slid up, wrapping her arms around his neck as her lips brushed above her ear. Consciously or not, you brought her back. You made her one of us. A slayer, who was made a dark stalker. Oh, the outrage you'll cause when Makai finds out. He pulled away from her, standing as his eyes suddenly burned crimson, his fingers clenching as he fixed her with a hard glare. I want nothing to do with Makai, and I want nothing to do with the rest of the dark. And I will not let Makai come for my friends. Oh, my sweet, sweet little brother, Morrigan giggled softly as she lounged back. I wonder if father knew how his little joke would become so true. A prince of Makai fighting to protect humanity. What will they say when they figure out your true nature? How will your little pet react when she learns what you did to her? She won't, he said it simply and softly, his eyes locked onto hers. She has a hard enough life ahead of her as is. Oh, but how long until she notices she's not getting any older? Morrigan stood up, draping an arm around his shoulder, whispering again into her ear. How long until she starts to manifest? You think you'll be able to keep her sealed up? Leaking just enough to mimic those pathetic little slayer powers? Fighting all these wretched little excuses for vampires? What are you planning? He turned, locking his eyes with hers as he would reach up, fingers slipping about her wrists and slowly pulling her from the grip she held on his body. Why, to have some fun, of course, my dear little brother. She let off a throaty laugh before pulling back, winking at her as her hair faded from emerald to blonde, eyes dancing as her face youthened until she looked no older than he. You have until your new school year starts to explain yourself to her and them, little brother. And if I don't? He already knew the answer. It was laughing in her eyes as he clenched his fingers tightly against his palms. My dear Alexander, she grinned, wickedly at her brother with a wink. Why, then I get to have the fun of telling them all your dirty little secrets. She paused, laughing happily as the shadows melted back across her body. See you at school, little brother. Well, crap, Xander pinched the bridge of his nose, I am so fucking screwed. Yes, Morrigan's voice floated about the room, but you're making things so very enjoyable for your big sister. As her laughter faded from the room, Xander flopped down onto the bed and grumbled slightly, fuck. Better find Buffy then. As the sun fell over her body, Buffy Summers relaxed back in her lounge chair next to the glittering surface of the pool. Her eyes closed, she shifted and relaxed against that gentle warmth, enjoying the peace and quiet. At least, she was until a familiar voice broke through her reverie. Hey, how come you don't wear that suit back in sunny hell? The half-grin practically bouncing out of the voice. Her eyes snapping open in a quick series of confused blinks, she turned her head to stare at the boy standing there. Xander? What, how did you get here? Why are you here? And quite drooling over me. Magic, kinda a long story, and no chance in hell, he shot back, chuckling a bit as he winked at her, his thumbs hooking into the belt loops of a pair of black slacks, and an untucked, sky-blue dress shirt. And, what are you wearing? She paused a moment, looking him up and down. Did Willow finally burn your collection of Hawaiian shirts? Wait, magic? Well, it's complicated, the boy admitted before gesturing to the chair next to her. Mind if I take a seat? Carefully, she gave a short nod of her head, eyeing his warily, though, I expect an explanation on the breaking and entering, because, I know my dad's not here to let you in. As he sat, he released a slow, deep breath ignoring her question as he shifted nervously in the seat. Okay. I've got good news, and bad news. The good news, I'm hoping will keep you from killing me when you get the bad news. Xander, the voice was warning, an edge of worried fear in it. What did you do? Saved your life? He put forth, gingerly. Well, yeah, with the CPR and whatnot. She shrugged a bit. I already knew this. You're acting like you did something horrible and evil. Well, you see, he winced quietly, CPR couldn't save you. The Slayer spirit that inhabited you? When it goes, it rips the soul out of the body it was in while it moves to its next host. Nasty little thing really. You're not making sense, son, she responded, staring at him as she looked him up and then down. Still slay gal here, and I'm pretty sure I still have my soul. You're not the Slayer, or even a Slayer, he corrected quietly, and yeah, you do have your soul, you're just not human anymore. That's funny, Buffy paused, slowly focusing her attention fully onto her friend. I thought for a second you said something that sounded suspiciously like I'm not human. Well, you, aren't, he responded, shifting nervously in his chair as he watched the tension starting to build inside of her body. And, if I'm not human anymore, what, exactly, am I? Her brow rose archly on her forehead as she stared hard at him. You mean, other than giving me the distinct impression you're thinking about making a Xander-shaped hole in the ground? He asked nervously, shifting on his seat. Yes, other than planning on making a Xander-shaped hole on the ground, she shot back, emphasizing the planning part of her sentence. You're a dark stalker, he supplied, slowly and carefully watching her reaction, a souled, generally human-looking creature of great power. I see, she looked at him again, studying him before rolling her eyes slightly. And how did you reach this conclusion? Because, to save your life, I made you one. He paused a moment, looking nervous as his eyes glanced around the yard, and I got found out. She actually laughed then, shaking her head as she watched his face. Seriously, you almost had me for a moment there, Xander. But, next time you're trying to fool someone, don't pretend you have some uber mystic powers. The look on his face stopped her cold, however, before she paled slightly. Come on, San, since when do you have mystic powers? Since a long time ago, he admitted quietly. I sealed myself, who I was, my memories, my powers, to have a nice, quiet life as a human. Until the master had to go and wake me up with his release and opening up the helmet. Okay, so what, you're one of these dark stalking things? She was slowly starting to inch, tenser and tenser as she watched him, eyes regarding him warily. Why are you telling me all this now then? Why not before I left? Well, I was rather hoping to never tell you. He responded with a slight shrug of his shoulders. Let you live on, thinking you were the slayer, me, going back to sleep, thinking I was human. Unfortunately, I don't have a choice in the matter anymore. And why not? Because my sister found me, he grunted slightly, twitching just a bit, and she was bored. Sister? She paused, blinking a bit. You have a sister? Older sister, yeah, he winced a bit. You'll meet her when school starts up. She's transferring in. How much older is she? There was a flash of suspicion on those shining eyes. Than me? He paused a moment, pursing his lips as he thought back. About 20 years or so. And how old are you? She asked flatly, glaring at her friend. He paused, lightly pushing his chair a bit further away from her. Can I plead the fifth on that one? How old? She was growling now, her eyes flickering slightly brighter as he could feel her power pulsing beneath the seals he'd placed on her. I'm still quite young for my kind, thank you very much, he huffed slightly before slumping back, around 300, give or take a few decades. You're older than Angel? She stared at him incredulously. But, younger than Darla or the Master were, he offered helpfully. Seriously, I was quite happy to be an ignorant mortal guy, completely ordinary, but no, that damned pathetic excuse for a vampire just had to go and force open the helmet. Do you know how much of pain it was to close that thing up and make it coincide with his death? You closed up the helmet? She just stared at him, for a long moment. Okay, seriously, you expect me to believe all this? What, you thought a tear in the fabric between dimensions just repaired itself? He rolled his eyes slightly before shrugging just a bit. Right, yeah. I guess I'm gonna have to step things up a notch? Xander, she was growling now, sitting up, then standing as she loomed over him. This is. Whatever else she was about to say was cut off, as the boy in front of her gestured slightly with the back of his hand, and suddenly she could feel a wave of dizziness washing over her. Suddenly there was a new weight on her head, and at her back as she shifted suddenly felt things she never had before. Eyes widening, she quickly looked over her shoulder and stared at the sight of the black and purple bat wings jutting sleekly from her back. That's how you look when you're unsealed now, Xander said softly, sighing a bit as he leaned back in his chair. Believe me, Buff, I never wanted you to go through this, I really didn't. You turned me into a demon? Her eyes flashed in anger as her wings spread reflexively outwards, her eyes boiling with anger as she stared at him. Darkstalker, he paused a moment, then flinched a bit before burying his face in his hands, his words barely murmured out as they reached her ears, succubus to be precise. You, she twitched, her eyes burning, you turned me into a damn demon? Why is it, people never fucking listen? Xander sighed softly before glaring back at Buffy as he stood up, his eyes suddenly flashing red as his own wings flowed from his back, spread wide as he glared at his friend. While I was trying to save your life, because hey, the parasitic little piece of demon shit that is the Slayer spirit was ripping your soul of your body, killing you. I used powers I wasn't aware I had. You lived, you're no longer the damned Slayer, and you still have your soul. He paused a moment, before glaring even harder at her. You are not a demon. Now sit down and I will try to explain this to you. The newly revealed succubus stared at the boy glaring down at her before dropping back down on her chair and pouting softly. Damn it, this sucks. No shit, he groused as he would slump down himself, and I am sorry about turning you into a dark stalker, I really am. But, I kinda prefer having you around, as to, well, not. He paused a moment, visibly looking her up and down with a grin. Plus, you really do make one good-looking succubus. Xander. She tried to glare over the blush that rose to her cheeks, before crossing her arms about her chest and sighing. Okay. You realize how much this is to suddenly dump on someone? He nodded quietly as he looked at her with those crimson eyes. I'm aware of it, yes, though, one upside to being a succubus. I get demony guys drooling even more after me? She offered sarcastically as she sent him a flat look. Nope, he grinned slightly, you get a great meal from a good fight. But, I thought, she blinked a moment, blushing brightly as she looked away, squirming uncomfortably, that, you know. Perfectly capable of feeding that way, the mundane way, etc. 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 He grinned back at her. I just figured you might enjoy more the getting it while beating the crap out of demons, but, if you want to go the other way, I'd be happy to help. The lascivious wink he sent her made her blush even brighter, before looking up at him, frowning slightly. So when I woke up in the cave, feeling stronger than I had before, I had to give you a good-sized chunk of my power. He paused, stretching out his wings a moment before they shrank back into his body. Fortunately, open helmet? Bad for keeping yourself all sealed up tight and human. Good for replenishing lost power reserves. How do I get rid of these things? She grumbled softly, gesturing to her wings with a sour look on her face. Oh, just will them away and you should be good. He paused a moment, though. First thing I'll have to teach you is power suppression. Can't have anyone figuring out what happened to you. Why not? She shrugged just a bit. I mean, hello. Not the Slayer anymore, at least from what you tell me. Well, let's see. He paused, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he continued. Maybe because that would mean the idiots at the Watchers Council, among others, would do their damnedest to try and have you killed? Not to mention all the people that would want to kill you for being little Alexander's pet. A feminine voice drawled from the side, drawing both sets of eyes to rather amused-looking Morgan in a somewhat conservative, emerald bikini. He might not look like it, but he picked up quite the list of enemies over the centuries. Most of them your exes, if you'll recall. Xander shot back, grumbling slightly. Buff, Morgan. Annoying older sister, ex-Slayer. I thought you were giving me end of the summer holiday? Wait. Buffy paused, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits as she interrupted them. Pet? I lied, the emerald-eyed succubus replied sweetly as she grinned back at her brother. I do that. You should know that better than anyone by now. Yes, I really should, he agreed, rubbing his eyes slowly. Sadly, I have this thing called hope, that you'll eventually remember I've treated you with more respect than anyone in Makai put together, and start treating me the same. But, where would the fun be in that? She countered playfully, winking at him before she dipped her toe into the pool. Ooh, nice. Hello? Buffy twitched slightly, her eyes beginning to glow just a bit as she glared directly at Xander. Again, pet? Well, you are his creation, Morgan supplied easily enough, and really my dear, she casually leaned down, whispering into the blonde girl's ear, there are far worse to be than the pet of the Prince of Makai. Prince? She stared at the now incredibly uncomfortable Xander, who was shrugging back at her, refusing to meet his eyes. Xander's a prince. That is generally the title given to the person second in line to a throne when they're male. Yes, Morgan supplied. Of course, almost everyone back home thinks he's dead. Which took quite a good bit of planning and work to pull off. Xander continued, twitching slightly. If it wouldn't be such a pain in the ass, I'd resurrect that vampire myself, just so I could dust him all in new, and humiliatingly painful ways. But he was responsible for this lovely family reunion. Morgan grinned broadly back at the boy before settling in next to Buffy. And really, you know you missed me. Only in the sense of wondering why I felt like my life wasn't anywhere near as annoying as it should be, Xander supplied, sighing again as he cupped his face in his hand. Gah, how am I gonna explain you to Willow? Your favorite cousin? Morrigan offered helpfully, her eyes twinkling with mirth. The one shining point in your bleak and abysmal excuse for a mortal family? She already knows I don't have any shining points in the collection of bums, alcoholics and panhandlers that I call my family. Xander shot back, before pausing. Hey Buff, think she'd believe she'd traumatized me so much, I suppressed the memory of her existence? I believe it, the blonde responded as she eyed the currently Viridian-tressed woman next to her. I already want to suppress all this. Oh, relax darling. Morrigan laughed softly, I'm going to have so much fun with you. Why'd I not like the sound of that, Xander? Buffy asked, slowly trying to inch away from the boy's sister. Because, you're smarter than the average blonde? Xander responded with a slight quirk to his lips, but really, she is the best person to teach you about your new body. He paused, slowly running his eyes up and down her form. Not that I wouldn't mind teaching you how to properly appreciate what you've got. Xander. Sadly though, Morrigan cut the petite girl off before she could continue. He is right. While his powers are similar to yours, you really are best learning from another succubus. And don't worry, Xander continued. As much as she plays around, my sister is firmly rooted in her interest in guys. He paused a moment. Twitching slightly as he did so, she has the list of ex-boyfriends to prove it. Again, as noted previously, the emerald-eyed succubus drawled, most of them on his list of enemies. Most? Buffy asked mildly, her brow arching curiously. There were the ones I killed myself, she admitted. Really, there are some things you just don't do to a lady. Still, there was that one that did get away, Xander responded casually, that Irish drunkard. Well, he was human, Morrigan supplied, shrugging just a bit, and he died in an alley a few weeks later. Still sets a bad precedent, Xander reflected, pursing his lips lightly. Are they still telling tales of what I did to the one after him? Only in the most horrifying sense, Morrigan responded with a shrug. It does keep the more squeamish ones at bay. She paused a moment, lightly tapping her lower lip. At least, it did until you went and died on me. I think they're finally convinced you aren't just laying in wait, waiting for them to let their guards down. Okay, just so you know, this is creepy, Buffy said firmly. So, a 14-year-old boy with dark hair and dark eyes looked through the dimly lit smog that permeated the room, his lips curled down with a sigh of resignation. Which one of you won Jess's soul from him? Another kid? There was an audible blink as the assembled demons shifted slightly, eyes of a variety of different hues looking over him. Look, your friend lost his soul fair and square. I know, the boy grumbled softly as he would walk over to the table and take an empty seat. He's like a brother, but he's none too bright. The kid shifted slightly, looking around, as he fought down the nervousness that threatened to bleed off his skin. So, how's this work? Just one hand for a soul, or you guys buy in with chips, to win it piece by piece? You know, the Vengeance Lord Dahafran noted idly as he shuffled his chips. Generally, history shows that people trying to win back people's souls is a rather doomed enterprise. Gee, y'all think? The boy responded with a sarcastic snap. But, hey, I figure, what the hell, if he's gonna be damned, he might as well have some company. My, isn't he just the manly one? The full crimson lips of Morrigan Ainsland parted, her eyes raking over the boy in front of her. A regular diamond in the rough, as it were. She paused, chuckling softly. You should walk away and leave it be, little man. Your soul's worth far, far more than your friend's. Well, the way I see it, Xander Harris responded easily enough as he locked eyes with the woman. If I walk away and don't do anything, I'm not really worth that much in the end. Oh ho ho. You have fire in you, little mortal. I, the Dark Adonis, a rather feminine-looking male demon with an open jacket and a bare chest, began before being cut off. Shut up, Vyers. A smirking figure decked out in red chuckled, from behind a pair of gold-hued glasses. Or, perhaps you'd prefer mid-boss again? Oh ho ho. You wound me, my dear Monsieur Alucard. The slightly feminine demon gasped, as he spread his fingers across his chest. To lay such a base slander against the Dark Adonis. Shut up, mid-boss, Morrigan cut him off, before rolling her eyes as she gestured to him. Sadly enough, he's the one that has your friend's soul. But if you want it, you have to play all of us, Dahafran pointed out mildly. Though, I'm sure we'll each be happy to stake something of value equal to your soul. HM. Alucard grinned as he looked over the boy, his crimson eyes gleaming beneath his hat as he considered, before his grin split even wider. I think, yes, I'll buy in with my next fledgling. There was a glint in those eyes, a touch of madness perhaps to be seen. She should be a lovely, proper monster. Well now, that's setting the value of the boy's soul quite high, now isn't it? Morrigan observed with a slight, feline smirk of amusement. Yes, quite the diamond in the rough indeed. She paused, before grinning sweetly over at Alucard. I suppose, to make things even, I'll buy in with Lilith. A muffled squeak of protest could be heard somewhere in Morrigan's general vicinity, while Vyers nodded in acquiescence. Well now, you have both offered up most generous prizes, and I find my own stake in this wager a bit lacking. Hey, Xander spoke up in protest. That's Jess's soul, and its value holds not a candle to your own, boy, Alucard spoke up, grinning broadly. The soul of a boy who ventures into this den of monsters, knowing as you do what the price that you could be forced to pay. Willing to risk it all for your friend. There is power in you, boy, even if you don't realize it. Aha! Vyers suddenly spoke up, looking extremely pleased with himself. I shall add to my wager. Access to the Dark Assembly. Okay. Xander responded slowly, eyeing the odd-looking demon as he settled into his seat, while he noticed the sudden gleam that flashed across D'Hoffryn's eyes. Well now, that is interesting enough for me to buy my way into this game. D'Hoffryn responded with a slow grin on his lips. So, I'll buy in with immunity to any wishes granted by my justice. Vengeance, Morrigan corrected with an amused smirk on her lips. Demons, the Lord of Vengeance finished, shooting the woman a mild glare as he huffed slightly. Well then, now that we've all bought in, Alucard offered up with a grin, shall we play? Damn it, Morrigan pouted softly as she leaned back in her chair. I can't believe I'm out already. But sweet Morrigan, Vyers smiled back at her, his eyes twinkling eagerly. Do not worry, I am sure your other half will go to a nice home. Oh, shut up mid-boss. The succubus grumbled slightly before leaning back, frowning as he glanced at the growing chip piles between Xander and Vyers. Standing up, she arched slowly, casually before walking around and draping herself against the human boy's shoulders. Could you not do that? Xander asked hopefully, his face flushing slightly. He could feel the warm touch of her soft flesh pressing against his own. I am still playing, you know. Yes, but you went and eliminated me. Morrigan purred back into his ear as she watched the cards being dealt out by a smirking Alucard. That leaves me rather bored until the next game starts up. So, you get to keep me entertained. Great. The enthusiasm in his voice was simply dripping with sarcasm as he sighed slightly before leaning back and resting his head against Morrigan's chest. Well, might as well enjoy it. Blinking slightly in surprise for a moment, Morrigan then let out a soft, throaty laugh. Oh yes, I do like you. Always happy to oblige, Xander quipped back with a slightly lopsided grin on his lips. No, how can I, the Dark Adonis, fall? Vyers' moan rose through the air as he stared at his empty pile of chips, before flopping back in his seat. Oh, shut up mid-boss. D'Hoffryn snapped, grumbling slightly at his own empty pile. We both lost, show a little dignity. It looks like it's just you and me now, boy. Alucard grinned wickedly at the boy sitting across from him, his fanged teeth almost glinting in the light. Yeah, Xander agreed as he shifted in slight discomfort where he sat, with Morrigan now happily occupying his lap. I don't suppose you could convince her to get off? Not a chance, little diamond. The no-life king leered back, as he began to deal. What, don't you love me anymore, Diamond? Morrigan pouted slightly as she turned wide, almost glistening green eyes onto the boy. Gah, but, I didn't love you to begin with. Xander immediately protested. Oh, Morgan paused a moment, her eyes immediately becoming half-lidded as she leaned in, and casually murmured into his ear. Don't worry, you will. Xander gulped, audibly as he stared at the succubus a moment, before picking up his cards with trembling hands. Well, congratulations, little diamond. Alucard was chuckling as he nodded his head in amusement. You've completed your little quest to save your foolish friend's soul. Xander breathed out a sigh of relief as he slumped back in his chair, while Morrigan cooed lightly into his ear. Now, as for your reward. Seriously, I just want Jess's soul. Xander gulped deeply, before pausing a moment and looking at Dahafren. And that immunity from vengeance demon wishes, that sounds like it'd be handy. Oh, but my dear boy, you won our bets fair and square. Vyers argued immediately in protest, smiling magnanimously at him. They're yours. Absolutely, Morrigan agreed as she wiggled just right against Xander's lap. We gambled, we lost. You've won more than any mortal has in quite a long time. You wouldn't want to be rude and refuse your winnings, now would you? But, Xander flushed brightly as he couldn't quite meet Morrigan's eyes. How about, you, keep my winnings safe until I need them? I think our little diamond is trying to deny what he's earned. Alucard spoke up, his eyes dancing with amusement. More and more your worth grows in our eyes. Bah, speak for yourself. Dahafren grumbled softly as he glared mildly at the red-dressed man. Some of us think he's a fool for trying to refuse more power. To each their own, my dear Dahafren. Vyers declared happily before shrugging slightly as his eyes twinkled merrily. It will be yours whenever you want it, young Alexander. When you're ready, I will show you how to use it. Such a pity. Morrigan's voice was a silken purr in his ear as he could feel her fingers wandering along his body. Lilith was so looking forward to getting to know her new master. Xander gulped audibly before managing to almost squeak out, "Can I get up now?" "Oh, I was fairly certain you'd been up for quite some time now." Morrigan purred back to the boy before letting off a throaty chuckle as his face flushed even brighter than it had before. Lightly patting his cheek, she slowly arched up and drew herself off his lap before leaning in and whispering against his ear. "Just remember, the offer stands. So, friend soul?" Xander asked, his face still flushed as he looked at Vyers, before pausing and looking at Dahafren. "And that protection? Your friend's soul has already been restored, my dear boy." Vyers chuckled as he would take a sweeping bow. For the Dark Adonis always follows through with his deals. Enough with the melodramatics. Dahafren twitched slightly before nodding at the boy. "It's already done. Well, it's been fun and all, but..." Xander nodded nervously to the rest of the players and slipped back out. "Such a shame." Morrigan sighed softly, before her lips curled into a wistful smile. "Ah well, wouldn't my retainers be outraged to learn a part of me is owned by a mortal boy?" "Indeed." Alucard chuckled softly before looking back at his fellow players. "But I have the feeling that we might just see our little diamond again someday. Soon enough, he won't be able to ignore what goes on around him, and when he does, he'll be back." Over a year later, Xander Harris stalked silently into the room, his eyes flinty and hard as he slipped into an empty chair and dropped a broken pool cue down onto the table. "What'll this buy me in for?" "Well now, welcome back, little diamond." Alucard grinned eagerly as he reached out across the table, picking up the cue in a white-gloved hand before examining it slowly. A moment later he let out a slow whistle of appreciation. "Well now, the weapon used to dust the body of the one you cared for enough to wager your own soul to save his. There is power in this, but you knew that, didn't you, boy?" Morrigan wordlessly shifted her chair up, next to the boy's, running her fingers through his hair a moment, before she whispered 2 words into his ear and moved back. "I'm sorry." Xander merely nodded, his hand catching Morrigan's own for some reason he couldn't fathom, giving it a light squeeze as he looked back at Alucard. "Yup, but I want nothing to do with it." With a nod, Alucard drew out a healthy stack of chips, then slid them across the table to Xander. "Then, you've bought yourself into the game." Turning his head, Xander nodded wordlessly to an oddly subdued Vyers, and a slightly respectful-looking Dahafren, before he spoke up, "So, what are we playing for?" And with that, the game began. "Alucard, might I ask why there's a broken pool cue hanging on the wall?" a distinguished-looking butler asked after entering into the No-Life King's room. "I bought it, of course, Angel of Death." Alucard's smile was more wistful, and a touch proud as he looked at the item in question, than his usual maniacal grin. "Then I am to take there's something special about it?" A slight grin curled upon the man's face as he studied the creature before him, amusement and curiosity in his eyes. "Oh yes," Alucard agreed, still smiling as he reached out, running a white-gloved hand along its length. "There is always power in a weapon wielded by a true knight, a true crusader. Especially when it's used to dispatch the body of one whom he willingly wagered his own soul for." "Ah, Is this someone Sir Integra would be interested in recruiting? The butler asked neutrally. Alucard leaned back and laughed at that, the sound rippling across the air before he turned and smiled, his familiar smile at the man. Oh, Walter. Now that would be a meeting I would love to see. But only if my master could see little Diamond as he truly is, instead of the rough he hides in. The rough, she would dismissive out of turn, as nothing worth her time, but… Walter arched a brow, questioningly at the creature before him, before offering a slight, dry smile. Found yourself a diamond in the rough? I never thought you want to be so poetic. He was born on a mouth of hell, angel of death, Alucard stated with a grin. And yet, at just 14 years of age, he knowingly walked into a den of monsters to wager his own soul to win back his friends. He paused a moment, his grin growing even more as he watched the look of comprehension blossoming on Walter's face. And what's more, he comprehended just what it was he was doing. He knew what he was wagering, what he was facing. Yet, there he was. If he was but a boy. Walter began, before frowning slightly and sighing as he remembered just what it was he himself was doing at that age. I suppose I'm hardly one to make comments about what little boys should and shouldn't be capable of, am I? Most definitely not, Alucard agreed with a quick nod of his head and a wink. Still, I'm not sure how my master would react to knowing that this boy owns a part of the heir of Mackay. Dear Lord, Walter muttered for a moment, before snapping back to his usual calm demeanor. Might I ask how all this is possible? Yes, well, you see. Alucard was strangely nervous for a moment as he winced slightly. There's a rather regular poker night we hold on that mouth of hell. I see. The man arched a brow slightly as comprehension dawned on his features. What did you lose, Alucard? I may have misplaced my gun. The being responded hedgingly, his eyes nervously flickering back to the man. Oh, Alucard? Walter sighed softly and shook his head. I suppose you want me to replace it and not tell Sir Integra? That, and not tell her that I lost her too, he admitted, smiling innocently at the butler. Ah yes, I can see how that would. The Englishman blinked a moment, then blinked again as he rewound Alucard's statement in his head. His voice suddenly steeling, he looked at the creature in red across from him as he ground his continued response. You bet Sir Integra in a poker game, and lost? No, Alucard responded with a devilish grin. But I thought I'd give you a good idea about how bad it could have been. You are a scoundrel. Walter responded with tight lips as he struggled to hide his relief and the small hint of humor that blossomed inside of him. Yes, so, my gun? Heya, Xander greeted Buffy Summers and Willow Rosenberg with a nod and a slight smile as he slid down into his chair. Hey Xander, where were you last night? Buffy asked up, a playful grin on her lips. You missed out on a great time at the Bronze Poker night, he responded neutrally as he settled back into his seat and yawned slightly. Poker night? Willow frowned as she sent back her question. Poker night, he affirmed and lightly rubbed his eyes. Was kinda fun once things got started. Gambling's illegal, Xander, Willow said with a look of disapproval. We don't play for money. Xander's lips quirked slightly as he grinned just a bit. Though, I might see if I could get Al to part with some next time. You play poker with a guy named Al? Buffy asked with her brow lifted curiously. Yup, Al, Morrigan, Hoff, and Vyers. He agreed, slurring Morrigan just slightly so it sounded far closer to Morgan than what it truly was. I don't recognize those names. Willow frowned slightly as she looked at Xander carefully. Yeah, they don't go to school here. Again, not a lie as he smiled at them, shrugging just a bit. I met them over a year ago through Jesse. Oh. At the mention of their friend's name, Willow immediately sobered up and nodded hesitantly. Okay. Nodding, Xander smiled slightly to himself before settling in for another long and rather boring lecture. Stupid giant praying mantis demonesses. Xander was grumbling softly as he slid into his seat, twitching slightly as he nodded around the table. Why, Xander, I could have helped you with that pesky virgin problem of yours, and it never would have happened. Morrigan purred slightly as she winked at him from her seat next to him. You know, it's bad enough that I have Lilith sneaking into my bedroom at night and trying to seduce me. Xander grumbled slightly as he settled back. Am I going to go through this every poker night? Only until you give in. Morrigan admitted with a grin on her lips. After that, it depends on how good you were and how much potential you have. Fine, how much will you give me in exchange for one night? no soul-sucking or mind-messing involved. Xander countered in resignation, as he casually watched her, letting a slight smirk grow on his lips. "You're learning, little diamond," Alucard said in approval, his eyes gleaming happily as he watched Morrigan give him a healthy steak of chips. "What do these chips represent anyway when we're not playing for specific things?" Xander asked curiously as he would lightly look around the room. "Why, mana of course my dear boy." Vyers spoke up happily. "What all creatures accumulate whenever they kill something else. Anything? Including vampires?" There was a speculative look in Xander's eyes as he looked over the chips. "Yes, however," D'Hoffryn spoke up, a look of amusement on his twisted face. "The amount of mana represented in your current chips is worth the destruction of thousands of freshly born vampires. The stronger the creature, the more mana killing them lets you gain. And mana is what gives you your powers, huh?" Xander finished with a slight look of amusement on his lips. "More empowers what we already have, allows us to do certain other things," Alucard corrected with a grin. "Things, like the creation of minions to do your bidding and fight by your side." "Huh?" Xander shrugged slightly after a moment, then nodded. "Cool, I'll keep that in mind. That's what I like about you, kid." D'Hoffryn smirked as he shuffled the cards. "You know when to let go." "Well, I did some here to play poker." He pointed out the obvious to the Demon Lord with a slight grin. "Anything else, that's just secondary." "Of course, little diamond, of course." Alucard spoke up, grinning wickedly in delight as he waited for D'Hoffryn to deal. Xander whistled happily as he ambled down the hallways of Sunnydale High, his dark eyes shining with a brimming confidence that seemed to scream out every pore. Eyes twinkling slightly, he would even dare to bring his eyes to those of Cordelia Chase, his smile slipping into a bemused little smirk. When she caught his glance, she immediately scowled back at him. "What do you think you're looking at, dweeb?" The venomed words spat past her lips as she glared angrily back at him. "Sure you want me to answer that question, Cordy?" He almost lazily drawled out his response, a brow quirking slightly as he threw in the little overly familiar nickname. "You probably wouldn't like the answer." "What?" Suddenly grew a spine and decided to act like you have a pair, Harris. Cordelia snorted softly as she lifted her chin, looking so dismissively across his form. "You can't even dress yourself, and you suddenly think you're up to handling me?" Her eyes began to burn when his first response was a deep laugh of amusement before he spoke. "Handle you? Cordy, sweetheart, I know you think you're some kind of shark in the grand ocean that's Sunnydale High." He rolled his eyes at that, the sarcasm rolling in thick waves past his lips. "But, seriously? You're just a fish in a pond. Not even a lake, a little, small, probably stagnant, pond." He shook his head, chuckling still as he watched her flush and growl, her eyes starting to burn directly into him as he brushed it off as if it were nothing. "It's funny really, I used to think you were this beautiful, desirable girl. An absolute bitch who dresses like she wants to be a high-priced hooker, but still, a beautiful one. Kinda a queen of the prostitutes, I suppose." Lightly tapping his lower lip, he considered her for a moment, watching as her face seemed to turn one shade then the next. "But then, seriously? I woke up, I realized that the world you live in? It's pathetic." Turning, he looked around, gesturing casually to the suddenly staring crowds of students all around them. "The only power you have? It's what they give you. What you trick out of them, bully out of them, tease out of them. It's not your power, it's theirs, given, rather foolishly I'd say, to you." Turning, he casually started to whistle again as he once more strode through the hall, before he cast a look back over his shoulder. "Me? I've seen real power, and I can tell you, Cordy, you don't have it." With that, he simply left a steaming, gaping Cordelia Chase struggling to regain her composure as the boy made it to the end of the hall before calling back. "Oh, you can go ahead and say something now. I'm sure your devoted subjects are eager to hear what you might have to say." As he listened to her wordless shriek escalating through the air behind him, Xander again let off a slow, happy whistle as he made his way to class. "Gee man," a happy grin on his face, Xander almost burst into the library as he slid across the floor, coming to a stop a few feet past the entrance. "Xander," the British man sighed in frustration as he glared back at the boy. "Must you?" "I must." The teen agreed with a broad, carefree smile. "It is utterly essential that I do." "And why, exactly, is it essential?" Giles pulled his glasses from his face as he carefully pinched the bridge of his nose. "Because it keeps me amused." Xander grinned back at the man. And tell me, G-Man, do you really want to see me bored? Giles opened his mouth to respond, before he studied the broadly grinning teen in front of him and his shoulders slumped in defeat. No, I honestly don't believe I do. See, that highbrow British education is good for something after all. Chuckling casually, Xander jumped up and plopped himself down on the edge of a table. So, what's the situation at Helmuth High Central? It's rather quiet at the moment, thankfully. Giles responded as he looked the boy over. Isn't there somewhere you should be? What can I say? Xander shrugged slightly and grinned at the man. I'm in an extraordinary mood today. Yes, well, considering how your evening went. Giles spoke up, a slightly bemused look on his face. Oh, you mean the bug lady? Xander waved it off with a grin and a smile. Nah, I got out of there in time for poker night. Oh? Giles arched a brow slightly as he studied the teen in front of him. Good night? I cleaned up. Xander grinned back at him. Probably the last time I will with them, all things considered, but still. Best of all, I don't have to worry about virgin hunting demons anymore. The librarian merely stared back at the teen for a long moment, before pinching the bridge of his nose once more and polishing his glasses. Xander, what? The boy responded, an innocent smile on his lips. Tell me, G-Man, when was the last time you got laid? Giles, do not answer that question. Buffy's voice rang out as she entered the library just in time to catch Xander's question. And I do not want to know how that even came up as a question you'd ask, Xander. But, it's so much fun to tell. Xander countered back, his face plastered with what Giles would describe best as a cheeky grin. Cheeky bugger, the Brit muttered softly with a slight glare at the boy. Limey Ponce, Xander shot back without missing a beat, almost laughing out loud as Giles' eyes almost bugged out of his face. A couple of my poker buddies have spent a good bit of time in England, G-Man. They've clued me in on a good bit of lingo and other things. So, I'm guessing the rumors about your little confrontation with Cordelia weren't that exaggerated? Buffy spoke up, eyeing Xander warily. You do realize, most of the school can't decide if they want to hug you or hurt you, right? They're sheep for the most part. Xander simply shrugged nonchalantly as he looked back at Buffy. If they want to be pissed, I pointed out the truth to them, that's their fault. Buffy stared at the boy for a long moment, before suddenly turning her attention to her watcher. Okay, Giles, can we do a spell to see if something hellmouthy is wrong with Xander? Giles twitched slightly as he would fluster in attempt to respond to Buffy's question. What G-Man is trying to say, is that he has a good idea why I'm acting like I am. Xander smirked slightly before shrugging and leaning back. I am no longer on the evil, virgin-seeking demon menu. Huh? Buffy scrunched up her nose in confusion as she looked at Xander. How? Xander stared at Buffy for a long moment, his face blank before he twitched slightly and spoke. Well, Buff, it involves a guy and a woman, with a distinct lack of clothing, lots of sweating, moaning, and if it's good enough, a lot of prayer and obscenities. Oh. Buffy blushed brightly for a moment, refusing to look at her friend before she fidgeted lightly. How, where, when? But, last night when I left you were. My night improved dramatically after we parted ways. He smiled at her in a half-masked grin while carefully examining his nails. Oh, guess that's good. Buffy admitted as she looked over the boy lounging back in front of her, uncertain if the sudden surge of emotion swelling in her chest was worry or jealousy. She paused a moment before looking at Giles. That's good, isn't it? Well, unless we were planning on using him as a virgin hunting demon detector, yes, that's good. Giles responded with a wry grin. Though, we can no longer use him for certain rituals that require virgin sacrifices. Darn. Xander snapped his fingers as he gave a wistful sigh. I was so looking forward to seeing Buffy in some night-type black leather. Xander. The Slayer in question gasped in a slight bit of outrage as she blushed brightly, and eyed him carefully. You were, huh? Well, that or latex, he admitted, grinning back at the girl. I could never decide which, as long as it was black, tight, and shiny, well. Buffy blushed even brighter as she stared at her friend, Xander. Buffy, he countered in a milder tone. Xander. She whined slightly, lightly slamming her foot on the library floor. Buffy. Xander shook his head, meeting her eyes with a playful look of disapproval. Tilda, that's blood enough. Giles cut them off, glaring at both of the teens. If you're going to argue with one another, at least have the courtesy to use a language I can follow, like Sumerian. He paused, before smirking slightly. And wait for me to get the popcorn. Giles. Buffy gasped in indignation as she glared at her watcher. Buffet. Xander intoned lecherously, his eyes twinkling as he gave her a wink. Gah, pervert. The blonde shrieked slightly before suddenly blushing brightly and glaring at him. Ha, I win. The crowing words left his lips even as he grinned triumphantly at the angry pout that blossomed on Buffy's lips. No fair, you cheated. HMPH. I never cheat. Angry indignation flashed in his eyes as he stood up, looming over the petite slayer. Take that back, or else what? Buffy challenged, her eyes defiant as she glared up at him, arms crossed about her chest. You sure you want to know? Xander asked carefully, eyes dancing. Yes, absolutely, positively? I do believe that's what yes means. You're quite certain about this? I already said yes, Xander. Xander turned to Giles and shrugged apologetically. Well, she asked for it. And with that, he suddenly whirled around, and swept the startled Slayer off her feet and kissed her hard for a long, drawn-out moment. Ahem. Giles coughed loudly, before repeating himself 3 more times before finally Xander pulled the Slayer up. Her eyes glazed with a silly little smile on her lips. Strawberries. Xander licked his lips slightly before winking again at Giles. Sorry, got caught up in the moment. Now, toodles. And with that, Xander turned and practically vanished out the library. Well, that was unexpected. Giles noted casually as he watched his still catatonic Slayer. Bloody amusing though. Lilith, Xander called out quietly as he lay back on his bed, his eyes open and staring up at the ceiling. Could you please ask Morrigan if she'd come here for a bit? I need to ask her something. Why Xander, the petite little succubus purred into the boy's ear, her crimson eyes glittering playfully as she lay next to him. If you wanted to have some fun, I'd be more than happy to indulge you. No need to go drag Morrigan all that way. He rolled his eyes slightly as his arm snaked down, and gave a playful smack to the dark stalker's ass, eliciting a startled eep of surprise from her as she looked at him with bright, eager eyes. No, Lils. I need to actually talk to her. I have no intention of doing anything else. Fine, but you owe me. She slowly arched back, stretching in a sensual arching of her back. No, technically I own you. Xander corrected with a slight little smile on his lips. Oh, finally figuring that out, The lithe little creature grinned slightly and nodded before she suddenly vanished in a flash of bright, yellow light. What I'm wondering about. He sighed softly as he lightly closed his eyes, resting there on his best and waiting. Sometime later, he wasn't sure when exactly, a familiar scent reached his nose, one that he could only truly describe as desire, battle, and freedom. With a slightly amused smile curling on his lips, he spoke softly into the air without opening his eyes. Hello, Morrigan. You know, you really shouldn't just assume it's me. Her voice came back playfully as he could feel a weight settling atop him. Not very safe. I didn't. He reached up, eyes still closed as she could feel his fingers tracing slowly along her back, caressing up, until he cupped against her cheek, softly stroking his thumb gently upon her face. I knew it was you. Oh? She let his touch wander with a familiarity that would have meant the death of most her cheek, nuzzling into his palm as she kissed it softly. And how, no one else, smells like you. He responded, a slight smile on his lips for a moment, before it faded slightly. What did you do to me, Morrigan? She tensed slightly at his question, but didn't draw away from his hand, as it kept stroking against her cheek. For a moment, she said nothing, her own eyes closing before with a sigh she slid down and rested her head against his chest as she spoke. Something very selfish. Well, you are demoness. His voice was softly neutral, but still he didn't open his eyes, waiting for her to continue as he somehow knew she would. I suppose I am, she admitted softly, before grinning slightly. I wanted what I wanted. So, I went and did something selfish, and probably very, very foolish. That being? Slowly he cracked open his eyes, and eyed her, a brow lightly arching on his features as he would reach down and slowly ran his fingers through her emerald hair. Oh, I bonded myself to you. Her response was so nonchalant that he almost missed how important that could be. Wait, bonded? Those eyes widened slightly as he would give her a look, a light growl burning in the back of his throat. What does that mean, Morrigan? Surprisingly enough, the succubus flinched back slightly as a wince rippled across her almost haughty features. It means, well, she paused a moment, struggling slightly as she hung her head, not quite looking at his eyes. I'm hoping it's enough to keep them from ever trying to force me to take the throne. That answers a whole lot of nothing. Fingers slipped up, and he grabbed hold of her hair as he forced her eyes to his. What does a succubus being bonded to a mortal mean, Morrigan? It means, the person that isn't on the dominant end of the link, is the pet of the one who is. She said it softly, quietly as she let him dig his fingers into her hair, and met his eyes with a slightly unreadable look. You aren't on the dominant end. Slow realization hit his eyes as he would study her carefully once more. Why? She shrugged slightly. I saw an out, I took it. I took a chance that you wouldn't take advantage of the situation. How the hell am I supposed to play poker with you now? He half demanded as he glared at her slightly, before sighing just a bit. So, that's why I've been acting like I've been acting. Why I kissed Buffy and left her, well, dazed and in need of a new set of panties? Morrigan offered helpfully, a smoldering smile laced across her lips. You might have inherited some of my lack of inhibitions, and you probably have some subconscious access to certain skills. What am I in for? Again his voice was soft, slipping past his lips as he spoke, before looking firmly at the creature curled up on his chest. I honestly don't know, she admitted ruefully. No Ainsland has ever put themselves in a submissive bond with a mortal. You should be honored. Joy. His face twisted slightly as he spat the words sourly before giving her a firm look. Bad succubus, bad. She arched back slowly, gracefully as she placed her hands on his chest and she looked down at him with hooded eyes. Oh, going to punish me, Yeah, he smiled back slightly. No for a week. Ah, being sent to my room without dinner? She pouted softly before grinning once more and shrugging. I suppose we'll have to find another player for the game. Don't forget, put up with Al's amusement. Xander pointed out before lightly brushing his fingers against her thigh. So, how is this going to work? He's going to be impossible, isn't he? She sighed as she responded, before lightly flopping down onto his narrow bed next to him as her clothes morphed into a simple pair of rather sedate pajamas. We need to get you a better place to live. She paused a moment before shifting slightly in the small space his bed allowed. And a bigger bed. Why? His brow arched slightly as he would look at her, his eyes glinting warily as leaned back against him. Forgotten that Al's next Draculina is yours, She smirked slightly as she looked back at him. And she won't be able to slip back to Mackay with a thought like Lilith can. She leaned in then, grinning wickedly as she lightly suckled at his ear. Plus, I do have some standards. Are you really content to stay so weak, in everything except your soul and your heart? Yes, because I so want my friends, including the Slayer and her Watcher, to know that I regularly play poker with a Demon Lord, a no-life king, succubus royalty, and whatever the hell Vyers is? I'm honestly not sure, Morrigan admitted as she leaned a bit closer against him. He's a demon of some kind, but we aren't sure what. He just showed up one day and bought in the game. Alucard seems to know something about him, but you know him in secrets. He gets off on knowing things the rest of us don't. Xander nodded back before yawning a bit once more. We'll talk more later, and figure out what to do, for now. I'm gonna get some sleep. All right, good night. She smiled sweetly at him, waiting until she was certain he was asleep before whispering against his ear. Master. Avada Kedavra. There was a flash of sickly green, as the sound of a body hit the floor. Ah, and one less blood traitor in the world. Would you agree, my dear Bellatrix? Stepping over the rapidly cooling body of James Potter, the man known as Voldemort offered a cold, twisted smile to the pale, but determined form of the newly widowed Lily Potter. Behind him, an eagerly grinning woman, almost a decade older than Lily, followed the first man. Dark, wicked eyes gleamed with sadistic glee as she looked down at defiant woman. Yes, my lord, the dark-haired woman agreed eagerly, before her lips twisted down into a slow slight pout of disappointment. But I didn't get to listen to him scream first. Plenty of that later, my dear. Voldemort spoke with a magnanimous gesture, his free hand sweeping back as he kept his wand leveled at the witch. After we deal with the boy. Pausing a moment, he drew his lips back into a cold, thin smirk, eyes glinting in cool, sadistic delight. I'm feeling generous tonight, little mudblood. All I'm interested in is the boy. In fact, I'll even leave you with enough to give the little half-blood and your blood traitor husband a proper burial. I'll never give you Harry." Lily hissed her words out as she stood protectively over her son, wand gripped with white knuckles in her hand. "And this, my dear Bellatrix, goes to show you why we have to get rid of these filthy little creatures." The man sniffed disdainfully as he looked down at the defiant woman. "Give them a chance at mercy, and what do? They refuse it." "Yes, my lord," Bellatrix hissed eagerly as slowly the baby began to cry out in his crib, while the elder witch thrust her twisting wand at Lily. "Shall I play with her some? Make her scream before she dies?" "In a bit, my dear, in a bit." Voldemort paused, acting as if the furious, tear-stained woman before him was nothing worth any consequence, but first. Avada Kedavra. No, that single word was screamed into the night, a defiance that sang with primal magics into the air. There was no spell, no incantation, no flick of her wand, only pure, wild magic responding to a single, selfless need, to keep her son safe. In an instant a shout of triumph became a scream of surprise, of disbelief as a primal wave of magic erupted through the air. A life in its prime was freely offered up to the essence of magic itself, with only that one request. It tore through the body of the self-styled Dark Lord, destroying his body, banishing away his soul before the disbelieving eyes of his most devoted follower. But the magic did not stop there. Magic saturated the air, pulsing, screaming out as it churned around the crying boy. Her lips drawn back into a disbelieving sneer, Bellatrix Lestrange née Black approached the mewling child, his brow decorated in a single bloodied mark. Hissing more animal than human, she raised her wand and leveled it at the boy. It was then, as the boy released another keening wail into the air, that the magic reacted to his cry, and his mother's intent and struck. A blinding light engulfed the room, and when it faded, the form of Bellatrix Lestrange no longer remained. Instead, squirming helplessly in the crib, a second, dark-haired child cried in unison with the first. Each clinging slightly to the other as the boy's simple, instinctive urge to not be alone, and the raw magical energies in the air had reacted. It would be in this position that Rubeus Hagrid discovered them both. "Oh, Albus," Minerva McGonagall's voice was soft as she looked over at the bearded wizard next to her. "I've heard. It has been a most eventful evening, Minerva." The headmaster of Hogwarts spoke in a soft, subdued voice as he looked out across Privet Drive. "Events of so many different kinds. Good, ill, unexplained, and even most perplexing. Then, it's true that you know who is dead?" The stern woman's voice quavered slightly as she turned her head looking at the man next to her. "Gone for the time, at a great cost, yes," Albus Dumbledore agreed, his eyes distant for a moment, before he continued in a soft, weighted tone. "James and Lily Potter were found dead at Godric's Hollow. Lily draped over her son's crib, Voldemort's destroyed body a distance away." Minerva gasped softly at the news, her eyes glistening immediately at the news of her former students' deaths. Forcing down the lump in her throat, she slowly dared her question. "And Harry? He was found, safe, save for a wound on his brow," Dumbledore responded, his eyes growing distant for a moment before he continued. "But, it was most peculiar, he was found in his crib, next to another child, a girl, the same age as he is, with dark eyes and dark hair. The Potters only had one child." The woman's voice immediately rose in surprised protest. "And I can't imagine either of them exposing another child to such danger." "Indeed," he immediately agreed. However, the perplexing thing were the empty robes, a woman's robes in fact, found on the scene. Along with the wand of one Bellatrix Lestrange. Yet, there was no sign of the woman herself, save. As the headmaster's voice trailed off purposely, his eyes met her own as she gasped in surprise. "Surely you don't mean?" "Yes, and no," Dumbledore responded, his words soft as the slip past his lips. "Physically, she is Bellatrix. And yet, her mind is that of an innocent, a child no older than Harry himself. There is something between them. Whatever was done was pure, primal, unfocused. A wave that left nothing but muddied waters in its wake. What have you done with her?" There was a touch of uncertainty in the woman's voice as she eyed the man next to her with an uneasy wariness. "She is being left in the care of someone suitable," Albus responded with a slight cryptic smile before he offered the woman a teasing wink. Bellatrix Tonks has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Oh, poor Andromeda. The woman struggled to keep her face straight at the irony of the situation. The cast-out black sister, raising her older, proper pureblood sister with her muggle-born husband. I hear young Nymphadora is already quite the handful. I have every confidence that she can help to raise young Bellatrix to be an equal handful. The headmaster held back a quirking smile from his lips as he responded airily. Are as certain that we should be leaving Harry here though? The woman made a distinctly unpleasant face as she looked back across Privet Drive. Those people. I've been watching them, Albus, they're the worst kind of muggles. They are the only family he has left, Minerva, the man chided softly, before pausing before he continued. Would you rather cost him his chance at a normal life? In the wizarding world, they're already talking about proclaiming this to be Harry Potter Day. I know it's just. I watched their son, chasing and screaming at his mother, kicking at her down the street for sweets. I can't imagine the kind of life Harry might have. It is for the best, Minerva, Dumbledore responded with a soft, subdued voice as he lightly lay his hand on her shoulder. It is for the best. So, they stood there, talking quietly into the night, until the massive form of Rubeus Hagrid appeared, bearing 2 children in his massive arms. The boy was left there, a letter on the basket in which he was laying. The girl found herself taken to another home, presented to a bewildered couple with wide, disbelieving eyes. It would be nearly 10 years before the two again would meet. September 1, 1991. As Harry Potter walked down the length of the train, his eyes wide and bewildered as he still couldn't quite believe just how things had been panning out. Still, as he searched for a quiet, empty cabin to settle in, he felt a sudden, strangely familiar tug. A slight, gentle thing, it was more a feeling than anything, leading him to one of the compartments, where he shyly stuck his head inside and carefully looked about. Hi. His voice was soft as he spoke, eyes still wide as he caught sight of a pair of girls, one his age, the other a good 6 years older. Is this compartment all spoken for? Watcher. The elder girl spoke up, her eyes dancing playfully on her round, heart-shaped face as her hair shifted to a brilliant bubblegum pink, and nah, just me and the squirt here. Feel free to come in. Thanks. The boy smiled eagerly as he slipped into the compartment then collapsed on the seat. Sorry, I'm still getting used to all this. Muggle-born? The younger girl asked, her dark eyes shining playfully before she stuck her hand out. Bella Tonks, and the walking gumball next to me is my big sis, Nymphadora. Ignoring the glare her sister gave her, the girl continued. Just call her Nim. Or, Nimmy if you want to get on her nerves. Not exactly. More, Muggle-raised I guess? Harry responded with a slight shrug and a bit of a grin as he shook the girl's hand. They tell me my mum and dad were magical, but I never knew em. My name's Harry. Harry? The girl dubbed Nim blinked a moment, before peering a bit closer at the boy before her eyes suddenly widened. As in Harry Potter? Yeah? The boy shifted slightly, obviously uncomfortable as he reached up, adjusting his cracked and damaged glasses. Still getting used to all that. Don't worry about it. Bella spoke up, waving her hand dismissively with an impish grin on her lips. Mum used to tell us about you, and your parents. Well, more your parents than you. No one would tell her what happened to you. She knew my parents? Harry stared back at the girls, his eyes wide. My aunt and uncle. They didn't really like them much. Don't see why not. Nim huffed slightly as she crossed her arms about her chest. They were great to be around. Lots of smiles and laughs, especially your dad. The girl paused a moment before looking down at Harry's face, her nose scrunching slightly. Want me to fix up those glasses for you? You can do that? The boy's eyes grew even further before he quickly bobbed his head. That'd be brilliant. Nim's great at fixing things. Bella's lips quirked slightly before she leaned in, whispering against Harry's ear. She has to be with how often she breaks em. Brat. The older sister grumbled slightly as she pulled out her wand, then made a slight flick and a gesture towards Harry's glasses, the cracked, taped-up frames repairing instantly. There you go. Thanks. The boy smiled softly before he would look carefully at the older girl. So, you knew my parents? Mum's cousin was good friends with em, introduced us. The girl responded back, looking out the window for a moment. They got along pretty well, probably considering how similar things were. Not too often that a pureblood marries a Muggle-born. Dad's the Muggle-born in our family, And he made sure we got great taste of it, Bella whispered conspiratorially to Harry. He even got Mum addicted to going to the movies. Dad and your mum used to love to tease Mum and your dad about all the stuff they didn't know about the Muggle world, Nim responded, before frowning slightly and shrugging. At least, I think. Been a long time. Yeah, we know Nimmy, Bella teased at her older sister. You're positively ancient. I bet you're hiding your wrinkles and gray hairs under there. Brat. The girl responded before smirking as she shot her sister with a tickling hex. You forgot, I can do magic here, which means I can hex you into next week. Eek. Bella was giggling madly as she twitched and turned. Naomi. He. Stop it. Harry watched the sisters with a smile of amusement on his lips as he leaned back against the seat. The laughter in their eyes and the smiles on their lips, it was a wondrous thing to him. Suddenly then, the door to the compartment flashed open and a pair of voices could be heard. Tonksi. Canceling the tickling hex on her sister, Nim looked up with an arch of her brow, as she beheld the red-headed twins Harry had seen earlier that day. Oi, what are you two troublemakers doing here? What, we can't come and visit our favorite, Hufflepuff? The twins shot back in a rapid back and forth succession. Harry, Bella, these two delinquents are the Weasley twins, Fred and George, Nim said with a smirk. The biggest troublemakers the school's known since the Marauders. Hallowed be their names, the twins responded reverently. Gred, Forge, this is my little sister Bella, and Harry. There was a sudden flash of red in the older girl's eyes as she glared down at the third-year twins. They're both off limits. Well, we understand sweet, innocent, pure little Bella here, one of the twins began, before giving the black-haired girl a knowing wink. But what brings out the legendary Tonks protective streak for this other ickle firstie? What do you think, Fred? Well, it's a bit perplexing, I'll admit, the second twin agreed, before blinking slightly. Wait, I thought I was George? It's your day to be Fred. Is it? I can never quite remember honestly, the first twin admitted with a grin, before he leaned down, studying a nervous-looking Harry. Now, what do we have here? Black, messy hair, brilliant green eyes, glasses, HM. Well, my good George, I do believe we have ourselves a bit of a ahem. Nim coughed pointedly into her hand then glared at the two. Harry's an old family friend. And my mother would be most displeased if anything happened to him. Instantly the two pranksters paled, visibly, before they both immediately took to nodding their heads, speaking as one. Whatever you say, Tonksi. Nim just loves to boss people around for a change. Bella whispered to Harry as she snuck up next to him, her eyes glittering playfully as she pulled out her wand. Watch this. Her face scrunching up in concentration. The tip of her tongue poked out slightly from the corner of her mouth. The girl whispered something under her breath and gestured towards the twins with her wand. Instantly the two redheads were matching Nim's bright bubblegum pink hair color. Giggling softly, Bella winked at Hare before quickly stowing her wand. Nim's lips twitched slightly before she let off a soft giggle as she looked at the two third years. That, and it's for your own protection really. Bella's a devious little brat. George, did we decide we were going to come as a matching set to Tonksi here? One of the twins spoke up as he looked at his brother's head. No, Fred, I don't believe we did. George responded back, looking over his own brother. Did you see her cast a spell? Not a one, Fred responded with a sage nod of his head. It would seem we may have a protege or two to work with this year. All we have to worry about is her ending up a snake, George agreed, nodding his head. Indeed, then we'd really be in trouble. Bella simply smiled a brilliant, innocent little smile back at the two, while Harry grinned softly and spoke up. So, what house are you two in? Gryffindor. They spoke in unison, grinning back at the boy before flopping down into the seat next to Nim. What house does the ickle Tonksi think she's going to? It's Bella, the girl shot back, lips quirking back into a slight smirk. And probably Hufflepuff or Gryffindor. Can't see myself with my nose stuck in a book like a Ravenclaw, and no way I want to be stuck in Slytherin with those stuck-up ponces. Aw? Harry blinked in surprise as he heard the vehemence in Bella's words. Don't mind Bella, Nim said with a wave of her hand. She just had her first exposure to the Malfoys this summer. Ah, Harry nodded in understanding as he recalled his own brief encounter with a certain blonde boy. So, it's true then, a snide voice called out, and as if summoned by his name, Draco Malfoy filled the doorway in all his 11-year-old glory. Harry Potter has come to Hogwarts. Glancing around the compartment, the boy sneered down a collection of people before him. If I were you, Potter, I'd be more careful about the friends I made. Fools and poor blood traders will. Whatever else the boy might have said, was cut off by 4 bursts of magic from 4 different wands. As he was thrown back across the hallway, Draco's hair turned a shocking neon pink, even brighter than that of the compartment's occupants, while his robes changed color to match. A moment later, those robes shifted and shrank, suddenly appearing several sizes too small for the boy. The final bit, however, ended with his nose, mouth, and ears being replaced by those of a pig. "Cousin," Nim's voice dripped coldly as she glared down at the boy. "You really do need to learn how to properly make friends. Now, run along." As Draco scrambled off with wide eyes, Harry blinked in shock before staring at the girl. "He's your cousin?" Nim and Bella both grimaced before replying simultaneously, "Unfortunately. I know the feeling," Harry responded as his thoughts drifted to Dudley and he shivered slightly. That's all for now. If you enjoyed, then please like, share and do comments.